great to see all of you here in the chat joining us to talk about nonprofit marketing plans. I'm Megan Donahue. I'm the content marketing manager here at Virtuous, and I am just delighted that our community comes together every week in this way to learn from each other and share what we're learning and ask our questions. I'm joined today by two excellent guests from Corporate Giving Connection, Chris Hammond and Jen Linck. Welcome.
Woo!
Hey.
Well, it's great to have you here, and we're going to dive right in. For those of you who are new to the Responsive Weekly, how it works is we start our conversation, and another conversation is happening simultaneously in the chat box. Make sure you've got that set for panelists and attendees so everyone can see what you're asking or what you're talking about. And feel free to surface questions you have as they come up, and we'll try to get to as many as we can in the 30 minutes we have. All right, so jumping in today, how should we approach marketing plans in 2021? Because we're in this space, right, where we can see that things are changing. We can see maybe things are opening up. Maybe the second half of the year is going to be different than the first half of the year and definitely different than 2020. But planning in that context is tricky, right? Because I noticed someone was saying, like, we don't know if our gala is going to be in person or a virtual event, maybe some kind of hybrid, what's happening. So Chris and Jen, do you have any advice just for approaching marketing planning in 2021 in this context we're in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. Hi, I'm Jen. I mean, flexibility is really the key word. So, you can't, you should always be flexible with your marketing plan anyway, whether we're in a pandemic or not. But I think just knowing as you make your plans that you might need to pivot and mix things up a little bit is really all you need. Like, plan for what you know, and then as things change, fortunately, I think things are getting a little better now. Like, last year was certainly everyone's plans just went out the window entirely, but this year, at least we know what happened last year, and a lot of us have learned what virtual is all about. So we're in a good place now. So yeah, I think just that willingness to make a plan and then deviate from it is all it takes. Well, not all it takes, but a starting point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think maybe one of my best pieces of advice is to make sure that you are trying to have a clear and cohesive approach for each one of your digital platforms, because I think that oftentimes a lot of organizations are like, hey, we're just an organization that speaks to our audience via email, or hey, we like to speak to them to social media. I think if there's anything we've learned, we've gained so much information on where do our customers or our supporters feel the most comfortable, and what is the type of messaging that they relate the most to. So I think throughout this time, all of those findings that we found in 2020, I don't want us to just fall back into our old ways of just saying, hey, we're an organization that speaks to folks from this specific channel. So I think as much as possible, take these findings, and we all had to be better marketers in 2020. We needed to find a way to keep our community engaged and to still show that the mission and the work was being done. And we needed to find those creative ways. I think we have to continue to have that creativity, take those findings, take those analytics that you were able to see, and make sure that you're still having that same sort of energy on each one of those channels of how you've been communicating with your audience.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's easy to think about times as far as like, well, when do I get to go back to doing things like I did in 2019? Like, when do we get back to that? And I'm sorry to say, you're both welcome to disagree with me, but my perspective is never. We're not going back to what we did before. We're taking what we learned and moving forward, which is a little scary, but also pretty exciting. I mean, when you think about what nonprofits accomplished in the past year and the ways that they shared their message, it can be a pretty exciting future to look into.
One of the clients I work with, had a huge success by changing an event to virtual, because in the past, only about 150 of their members had been able to come, or it's a special leadership conference they do, and instead of all 1,000 of them. And so when we switched to virtual, all of a sudden we had 800 instead of 150 come to this event.
Wow.
And that meant that we had 850 leaders trained instead of 150. And it means that, it doesn't mean we won't necessarily do it in person again, but it does mean that it's something to consider, at least doing part of it virtually from now on. So
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, no. So just some real quick. I was gonna say, I agree with you, right? Life. We're not going to forget life of the pandemic. We're going to have to switch the ways that we do things. And I wanted to just give a quick example really quickly, because I like to use this example a lot, because during the pandemic, so many organizations, they actually saw their fundraising go up. And one of my best examples is my alma mater, because I like to watch what my alma mater does from a fundraising perspective. And last year, in the heart of the pandemic, they didn't really have anything else that they could do. So they really drove their giving day, and they had, I was very impressed with their ability to think outside of the box and to story tell in a way and really capitalize on what was going on. And they doubled their giving day last year.
Wow.
And then I watched that they just had their giving day last night, actually. It just ended. And I even saw that they had taken their foot off the gas a little bit, and they didn't have that same energy, that same excitement, and the same storytelling and the willingness to really get the messaging out in front of us. And it raised $300,000 less than it did last year. To me, we have to pay attention to what worked and how did our audience react to certain types of communication. And we have to continue to build upon that, because just as people were able to see those increases, just as Jen was talking about, and increases in engagement, you have to continue to keep that momentum going. So those are always things to keep in mind.
Absolutely. And Terry in the chat brought up a great point that we talked about a little bit in our Tuesday email this week too, of like things have always been changing. And our essential job as nonprofit communicators stays the same, right? It's connecting audiences to our story. It's doing that storytelling. It's bridging the gap between givers and the good that they do. So that stays the same. And we've always needed to learn more about new tools and adapt our way of doing it. So in some ways, this is staying the same course, which I find encouraging. You're like, okay, we don't have to rewrite and relearn everything we ever knew. We're just taking in a little more data about digital engagement, things to do when we can't be in person, ways to make more connections. So looking at these plans, marketing plans, what do you think are the most important elements of a marketing plan, taking it back down to basics for a minute?
Yeah, I mean, Terry, like you said, she's not wrong. I mean, marketing has been going digital, or has become digital for, I don't know, for all years now. So in terms of the basics of a marketing plan, none of that changed because of the pandemic. It really just comes down to who's your audience, who's your key audience, who are they, what do they care about, what's the message that they want to hear, and how do you deliver that message to them? Where are they? Where do you find them to deliver that message to them? So, for the most part, that's done digitally. It's email, it's social media, it's digital advertising, video. It's not as much direct mail. I know some people still do a lot of direct mail, but it's all about the same. I mean, it all comes down to the fundamentals of who's your audience, what do they care about, and how do you get to them?
And then I'll add, so just so you guys know, Jen does a bulk of our marketing plans for our clients, and she really breaks it down really nicely. And so I wanted to just kind of rattle off some of the main components that we try to focus on a marketing plan. And I think this is something for you guys to start thinking about. And we know that you guys can't always have every day where you could be coming up with your marketing brainstorming sessions. I know we all wish we could have that, but when you guys do have the time, here's some key components that we like to include. So we like to have the strategic objective. So what is the strategy to accomplish the goals? The tactical objectives. How are we actually going to implement this? Understanding our key audiences. Jen does this incredible job of really understanding the personas that are currently engaging with your organization and engaging with your mission. So trying to identify who are those donors, who are those volunteers, what are their likes, what are their interests. Having taking a step backward and really understanding what is your value proposition. There's so many organizations that we speak with that don't actually know their value proposition. It needs to be something that's very clear. Understanding the key messaging, the supporting content that you're going to need, the distribution plan, ideas on campaigns throughout the year, so you're not just coming up with them willy-nilly. Partner marketing recommendations. If you do have partners, how can you find those ways to activate those partners? Understanding your analytics and having a strategy for that, having a marketing calendar, and then also creating a sample budget and finding different opportunities to audit your website. So there's a lot of components of a marketing plan, and they don't need to be as robust as that. But these are all just things to think about when you are having those conversations with your stakeholders. These are some of the things that you should really try to focus on.
That's a great overview and really comprehensive. A question that came up in the chat was, since you've been working with clients through this past while, any standout stories or discoveries you made with them or saw happen out in the real world from a marketing perspective?
And I'm sure you have some.
Do I? I mean, I will say, last year, one of our clients with the pandemic realized that it's a member organization. And so their members, all of a sudden were having to move home from school and start working from home. And so they came up with a lot of programs that I think were really important. One, a fundraising program, an all-in relief fund, essentially, to help out the particularly it started with students, but then we also added in professionals later on. But students who didn't have a computer at home, for example, and needed money to buy a computer because now they had to do class from home. And so we had to build a marketing campaign around that, which had to be done very quickly. We really had to reach out and kind of tug at the heartstrings. I think just the timing of it is what made it important and special. And we got a great response from it. Normally we raise a lot of money for scholarships, but people still gave to scholarships, but they also gave to this fund in this time of need, which was nice. We also did a series of, to increase engagement with members, we did a series of espresso shots. So quick videos from staff talking about tips for working from home, how to be a student from home. It was probably a series of 15 videos that we did that we put out on social media. So that got a lot of engagement. I think, it caused us to really have to set aside everything we had already planned and do some new things very quickly. So last year was the pivot year. I think that was our word of the year. Chris, do you have examples?
Yeah, I did have one specific example. Mine is a little more of a marketing fundraising hybrid. But one of our clients that their mission was pretty straightforward. They were focused on teaching financial literacy, and they would always have an annual gala that they would do. But after all of the racial injustices that had happened in the summer, they had taken a hard look at themselves, and they had decided, rather than focusing on their normal gala, they wanted to pivot, and they wanted to do a virtual campaign where they focused on Black, Indigenous, and people of color, and making sure that it was something that was a campaign that was focusing on those individuals, because they felt that was their audience to begin with, and they felt that it would have been a disservice if they didn't make that pivot. And so they ended up deciding to do a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, and they made it a point to still weave in some of their financial literacy pieces, but they also wanted to give some faces behind their audience. And this was something they had never done, a peer-to-peer fundraising campaign, and their board members and some of their key volunteers and donors were the ones that were driving this campaign, but they made it incredibly personal in sharing their specific stories. And Bank of America got really excited about this campaign that they were doing. So they said that they were willing to match every dollar on the dollar that they raised. Their goal was to raise $50,000, and they blew it out of the water with $133,000 raised on their first ever peer-to-peer campaign. And I think it was the fact that they took a moment and they were able to really understand and survey the landscape and survey their audience, really. And they did something that was bigger than just financial literacy. They were doing something that was actually beneficial for the people that have been the reason why this organization has been around to begin with. So it was really incredible to see. And they're still going to do a gala now. They took a moment and they said, we'll wait till the spring of 2021 to do our gala, rather than doing a gala at this really pivotal time.
Yeah, I think that really calls attention to the importance of listening, which we talk about a lot here at Virtuous, as being a responsive fundraiser, that listening is that first step, right? Of seeing like what is actually happening with my actual stakeholders, and where is the need, and where does that meet with what I want to accomplish, instead of like, well, we scheduled a gala, so we have to have one. Nothing we can do about it now. And the other thing both your examples really made me think of is that we can change and do things rather quickly if we have to. And I feel like sometimes we get into like, well, if we're going to do a whole video thing, then we got to work with a production company. We got to get all this stuff going. We have to all that. And it's like, no, now that we have these cameras on our phones and all these things, like you can get things going a lot faster than we used to be able to, which I think is encouraging.
I mean, Megan, you're so right with that. I feel like, I have this bad reputation of being the ultimate optimist, right? So everybody at a certain point was like, Chris, chill. Like, not everything is possible. Jen is usually that person saying, Chris, chill, like, take it easy. But it is very easy to use excuses to hurt and impede your progress. So I fully agree with that sentiment. Everybody just has to be willing to make a shift, willing to make a change. And from there, you're going to figure it out, right? You guys have these fearless fundraisers and these fearless supporters that are ready to jump when you say it. It's just, you have to make that move. And I know that there was a lot of people, especially in that spring, right when the pandemic hit, that everybody was like, well, what do I do? And you just have to be like, hey, you know what? Our audience is going to follow. We just have to make a clear and cohesive direction as an organization, and everybody else will support what we're doing.
I am going to chime in though and say, please remember, your staff is tired. So we had a year of dropping everything and pivoting at the last minute and making changes and making videos out of nowhere and redoing all the work we'd already done. And the staff is exhausted. So and your members, your fundraisers, everybody's just tired. And that's been the theme, I think, of 2021 is, like this virtual thing is great, but how much longer are people going to be able to just sit at their computer and do virtual interaction? So I think we have to be aware that there is an exhaustion.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think especially at this time, there's a lot of value in picking the things you're going to do with that in mind and carefully, and being deliberate about them, and choosing things like, this is a thing that I can actually do in the real world, which includes the fact that my staff is exhausted and my donors are distracted, and I am trying to fund this organization and also do 60 billion other things, because that's what being a professional fundraiser is. Um, so I think there's value in kind of in focus,
Mhm.
and choosing like, okay, maybe this isn't the year that we launch 60 campaigns and add to our direct mail and do all these other things, if that's not really where you are. So being honest with yourself about, what can I actually accomplish? What can we do well? And really, again, back to Jen's point of like not taking on that nonprofit more with less manifesto that drives yourself into the ground, because that's like, there's no good in that. There's no
No.
good in creating a marketing plan that's going to make you hate your job and start feeling like, I don't even want to talk to anyone about this organization or this cause. I'm going to hide under my desk till this is over. Um, so pivoting a little bit, because that's what we do now. We pivot. We just
Mhm.
pivot all the time.
Yep.
Myrna brought up a point too of, so you can't be everything to all people. Like you cannot uh, create a marketing plan as, this is how we appeal to the entire world.
Yes.
How many personas make sense in that context? Is that even the question?
Yeah. I'm so glad you picked that out of the chat, because I noticed that one too. This is a big struggle we find when we're doing marketing plans with our clients, is that, you say, well, who are you targeting here? Well, everyone should care about our message, our cause, our mission. Well, yes, okay, true. But you can't, as Myrna said, you can't be all things to all people, and you don't want to expend your energy on those outliers. So really figure out like who, and I can't give you a magic number of how many is right for you, because depends on the size of your organization. It depends on what your cause is. It depends on how much traction too you're getting. Like maybe you've picked a main persona and that's not working out for you. But there's gotta be the one person that you're talking to. And it's like there's the people who benefit from your mission. There's the people you want to donate to your mission. Um, so you kind of have to keep those folks separate and say, when I when we are talking about who this marketing campaign is for, like who are we talking to? So let's say it's our main donor. We think that is probably a woman from the age of 50 to 75, and these are where the things she cares about. This is what she reads, this is where she gets her information, this is what she um it's like you all have to have that person in mind as you talk about what's your messaging and how do you get to her, like what is really gonna tug at her heartstrings, what is gonna make her like get her fired up and make her want to pull her wallet out and do that donation. So it really helps if you can narrow it down to one main person, and then make sure that the whole staff is on board in terms of, this is what we think that person is. Where right now, if you don't define that, Joe at the next cubicle over might have a completely different person in mind as who this key donor is. So it's really important that as a group, your organization figures out, this is who we're talking about when we're talking about our key donor. And that's the persona. And so, yeah, I'm seeing some great comments in the chat about what a persona is. So yes, it is this basically an imaginary person who, it's never going to be perfect, but at least you can say like, this is the age range. We think it's a woman. We think that she is, she's in this economic sphere. Like she likes to read Facebook, or she only reads LinkedIn, or she still just gets her news off the TV. but it's figuring out who you are all talking to so that you can all make sure your messaging is on point for her. Does so but you might have secondary personas or even third personas as well, because you might say, well, our other person, we also appeal to 20-year-old men, and that's a whole different message and a whole different medium. So it's important to figure out what that is and define it as an organization and have everyone on board so that you're all seeing the same people. You even give them names, right? Like Donor Dana, or, that's the only one I can come up with right now, but, and then you all call her by that name. So I think it's really effective actually when it's done right.
And when Jen makes these, they are fascinating to look at, because she breaks it down even to the level of what channels do they watch, how do they consume their media, what are the ways that they engage. And so we're always trying to find these ways of informing our messaging. And I think it's a great way to keep the organization accountable, right? If you're just going out giving a message and it's not speaking to any of these people, then it's like, who are you talking to? And what are you hoping to accomplish with this messaging? So not only is it a great way to inform yourselves of who your community is, but it truly is a way of keeping yourself accountable, so that, sometimes some wild ideas will be thrown in. If it's not speaking to a specific donor or persona of your audience, then it probably is not the right messaging for this time.
Yeah. And I think Terry brought up a great question too, of like, if we're only looking at the donors we have and we're communicating to them, how do you diversify your funding base in that context? So my initial inclination is you start thinking about personas who are those other potential people you want to create, and creating that persona of, this is the person who's not here yet, but how do we start appealing? What do we start giving and putting out there so that maybe we attract them? Does that make sense to the two of you, or are there other strategies for diversifying?
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to make that part of your goal, one of your goals. So when you're making the plan, if one of your goals is we need to diversify our donors, then take a look at what's the next level, or what's the next group of people where you're seeing some traction. Maybe you're starting to see a different age group, different gender, something like that. Like I was saying, like maybe you're starting to see that you're getting to young men. They're starting to give. So then develop them as a secondary persona and create campaigns specifically for that, to test the waters and see how it goes. So I think that's an example of you just being deliberate about saying, this is a goal of ours this year. So we are going to take some energy away from our main donor, and we're going to put it into exploring this other donor persona.
Yeah, and I would add to it. I mean, I think it's fairly self-explanatory sometimes, in the sense that you could just look at who you're speaking to, who is your audience typically. You might say, hey, I'm speaking to Gen X and I'm speaking to millennials, and you can say, this has been great. They've loved our messaging, but we really want to bring some Gen Z people in the mix. So I'm sure that's going to be a different, marketing strategy, different messaging. You're going to be meeting them at different platforms. You're going to be going on TikTok. You're going to be using Instagram Reels at that point. So making sure that you're just looking at who is this demographic that you're trying to speak to, and then trying to find out what are the platforms, the channels that I need to use, and then taking it another step further and saying, what is the messaging? What are their motivations? Am I framing my storytelling to make sure that I'm keeping their motivations in mind? So these are all those different pieces of the puzzle of you want to look at who are you typically talking to, but eventually you want to make sure that you have a goal of who you would like to talk to, something that can actually be something that's important to them as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and it can change your whole communication outlook, because if you in the past have been outreaching to boomers, and now all of a sudden you want to go after Gen Z, you're really going to have to look at all of your communication. You need to look at your website. You need to make sure that you I mean, there's a different sensibility there. There's you talk about like the Black Lives Matter movement last summer. You're talking to boomers in a very different way than you're talking to Gen Z about those things. And there's a different sensitivity there and sensibility. So you really, if you're making a wild shift, make sure that you're looking at all of your messaging and making sure that you're not potentially doing anything that might turn off one group or the other.
Well, as always happens, we're already at time. Really quickly, Chris and Jen, if people want to reach out to you and learn more about CGC and what you all are doing over there, what are the steps they can take? I'm dropping a link in the chat.
Yes. So this is our free 30-minute consultation. We want to make it a point to help as many people as we can. So I honestly, I love these type of calls. So please feel free to sign up for a free consultation. We're not going to sell you anything. The idea is for you to tell us your pain points, and we are going to rattle off as many different ideas and brainstorm as much as we possibly can in a 30-minute time frame. And if it ends up being something that we could actually help you guys and support you guys, so be it. If not, we hope that we can provide you with the tools you guys need to be successful.
Wonderful. Well, thank you both so much for joining us today. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Quick announcement. Next week, there will be no Zoom call of the Responsive Weekly because the Responsive Nonprofit Summit is taking place. I'll tell you more about that in my recap email, along with the link to consultation options with Jen and Chris and some bullet points of what we learned today. I wish we could get to every single question every single week, but thank you for asking all of them, and we will see you next time. Thanks again,
Thank you,
Chris
guys.
and Jen.
We had a good time.